Welcome to the Leadership with Biana Kovic Show, and thank you for being with us. Our topic, leadership, focuses on leaders such as yourselves. We believe that leadership is a skill that can be learned through practice and awareness. It is our hope that our conversation will help you become more reflective when it comes to your own leadership practices and enable you to leave a positive legacy. Our very special guest tonight is Nina Dibner. Nina is the founder and executive director of PowerTools, a woman's own educational and corporate consulting firm. PowerTools offer both corporate and educational consulting in the areas of effective teaming, leadership development, diversity and inclusion, social emotional learning, and positive culture and climate. Nina oversees a growing team of consultants and youth development experts and manages increasingly complex projects nationally. A veteran educator, in 2006, Nina formed her own consulting firm, Dibner Consulting Services, which focused on social emotional learning in schools. Dibner Consulting Services' success led to forming PowerTools in 2014. Nina has a BA in International Relations from University of Wisconsin-Madison and a master's degree in education from the University of Minnesota. Nina, good evening and welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's so wonderful to be here with you.
Nina, you are the founder and the executive director of PowerTools. Could you please tell us more about your organization and how did you go about starting it?
Absolutely. My organization, as you mentioned, focuses on two arenas. We work within educational institutions and also most recently with corporate clients, helping them create systems that promote equity and where people enjoy working and being. My company was actually founded when I was an educator. I had taught middle school, and then I moved to New York and started teaching high school. And at the high school where I was teaching, we had a program called Advisory, and it was basically a social emotional class for young people that supported the whole child. And I found that this was the most exciting part of my day. I was able to form connections with the young people and help them build social emotional skills that I knew was very important for them and missing in some other academic classes. I was so excited about this programming that after 8 years of teaching high school, I decided this is what I wanted to do full time. And I started my own firm, Dibner Consulting Services, to do just that. And I worked with schools, working on advisory programs. And then I found that doing this work was really important, but it was incomplete, that I wanted to help schools and educational institutions with their cultures and climate so that people had environments where they felt that they were supported, both young people and adults, and systems that worked. So I started to expand the work into culture and climate, and in 2014 I rebranded and started PowerTools as a successful organization, and now we serve corporate clients as well, doing effective teaming work, helping teams work together and enhance engagement and capacity.
That sounds wonderful. I would like to go back to the social emotional learning. Could you tell us what are the aspects of the social emotional learning that you focused on?
Thank you, definitely. The social emotional learning are all of the things that we do during our day that are not necessarily content focused or academic focused. So some essential social and emotional skills are resilience, gratitude, stress management, anxiety management, follow through, and diligence. Those are the skills that help young people thrive, and those are the skills that employers want to see in their employees. So when I was teaching, I found that having the opportunity to help young people with goal setting and resilience and compassion help them both socially, but also help their well-being and continues to help well-being and academic achievement. And I've noticed that these are the skills that, like I mentioned, are really important in the workplace as well. So when we talk about teams being effective, yes, we want to make sure that strategies are working and that they have the right product that they're producing. But most teams fail because their team members are not aligned and they're not exhibiting the social emotional skills and the interpersonal dynamics needed to make the team work. So that's why I'm so interested in the social emotional aspect.
Thank you very much for talking about it. I know that the research has been done on relationship between happiness and performance, and that it has been concluded that if people are not happy, that they generally underperform. Would you say that social emotional learning enables person to become better integrated within so that he or she can perform better in school or at the job?
That is absolutely true. So, I'm just going to take the workplace, for example. The first we want to do is we want to make sure that people feel like self-aware. So they're able to identify when they're feeling stressed out so they could use stress management strategies. We want them to be socially aware. For example, how many times have we had a super annoying colleague, and we might just say, oh, the person's a jerk or they're inept. But when we gain awareness of learning styles and working styles, then we could say, oh, I understand. This person works better when they feel like they work better when they procrastinate. It's a working style difference. Then that can help us bridge some gaps. Of course, it's so annoying when they might procrastinate, but we can depersonalize it. And then also it helps when people, exactly like you said, when they're taking care of themselves and when they're aware as a team about their working dynamics, and when leaders are able to put in place elements that help teams be happy and engaged, statistics show they're much more productive. Currently, in the United States, only 30% of people feel engaged in the workplace. This is a Gallup poll. And that's something that we really have to change. And that's not just about improving a product or a marketing strategy. That is going to be around these social, emotional, and behavioral aspects in the workplace.
That is very interesting. As you know, our show is about leadership, and I strongly believe that effective teaming and team building are the vital components of successful leadership practices. Could you tell us more about team building, effective teaming, and the leadership skills that your organization consults their clients on?
Yes. So you're absolutely right. I think leaders are responsible for so many aspects of making a school or a company work. And a lot of it is around managing their team and helping their team be productive, number one, but also creating an environment where people want to be there and feel both seen and, acknowledged, but then also supported with relevant work that has purpose to them. So when we do work around team building, there are so many different labels, and one of them is team building, and one of them is effective teaming. So when we talk about team building, that's around cohesion of the team, helping people see each other, support each other, feel compassionate towards each other. And we know when people feel that way, then they're much more likely to work together and be more productive together. Effective teaming goes beyond team building. Effective teaming is to help the team build cohesion, but also to help the team become more productive with each other because they're able to reflect on the way that they interact. So not just about feeling connected to each other, but really analyzing how do we work together? What are the best ways for us to enhance our communication, our collaboration, our productivity, and then using those insights to build action steps towards being a more effective team. So leaders have to keep that in mind all the time. And so we offer services that combine fun, because we know people learn more and are more engaged when things are fun, with some really interesting opportunities for both reflection and for us to give our expert opinions on what we see in terms of the team dynamics to help people come to ideas of how to enhance their teaming.
Interesting. Nina, you are an expert on leadership, and I was wondering if there are traits that a leader needs to have for his or her team to be successful.
That's a great question. Let me see. If I were to pick one, wow, that's a great question. I think I'm going to say right now that accessibility is really important. And by accessibility, I mean that there's an opportunity that the door is always open for communication and feedback. I think a lot of we're shifting now in the workforce, but it used to be that people would have once a year yearly reviews where an employee would meet with the leader and the leader would say, this is how things have been going, throughout the year. But research is showing that millennials in particular, but many people are not happy with the yearly review. It's not enough communication for people. So a good leader has their door open, and not only to invite people in, but the leader is out with other people, helping them with feedback about their own work, but also inviting people to collaborate in terms of the direction of the company and what they think would help the company succeed.
So what I'm hearing is engaging employees in a meaningful way so that they feel that they matter and they're being heard.
That's correct. Absolutely. And I think that's important. We know diverse teams are much more effective. They're apparently 7 times as effective as homogeneous teams. And so what happens is there are many ways that we think about diversity too, ethnically, racially, age. There are all sorts of different ways. Now, you can have a diverse room with many people sitting in the same office, but if you're not accessing people's opinions and insights, then the diversity is lost, or the benefits of the diversity are lost. So that's why accessibility is so important, is we want to really leverage the opinions and insights of everyone in the room.
Thank you very much for mentioning that. In our previous conversation prior to this show, you talked a lot about your company being a big advocate in supporting people to talk about diversity and cultural differences, which in some companies, these topics are not very welcome. However, your company seems to be at the forefront of the conversation. Am I right about that?
Absolutely, and you're right, Biana. Research shows that companies that are diverse groups outperform homogeneous groups by 7 times. That's according to a Gallup survey. So we know that diverse teams work and are important for companies in terms of productivity, but also in terms of reflecting the world and consumers. And, it's important to be diverse. However, for some reason, there is some hesitation about talking about diversity, and I think some anxiety about some of the problems that diversity seems to cause in companies. So we feel it's very important to talk openly about diversity, about the strengths of diversity, and how companies can leverage that diversity to be the best they can. So I'll give you an example. One of the largest gaps in understanding in regards to diversity is generational diversity. So we have many, many companies that have a growing number of millennials, and in general, millennials tend to communicate in a different way than people who are traditionalists. So when I say millennials, I mean people who were who are in their 30s now, and they sometimes communicate more by text or direct message or email, whereas people who are a bit older in their 50s, 60s are used to communicating through the phone and in person, and in fact may feel that it's disrespectful when their younger colleagues are not eager to talk to them on the phone or step into the office to have a meeting. What can happen is people don't think about it in terms of diversity, in terms of generational differences, then it can breed resentment. And when resentment breeds, that can have an impact on promotions, periodic reviews, and it can prevent some people who might be very skilled from progressing in their jobs because they might be seen as disrespectful. So it's always important, and we have a lot of people saying, oh my gosh, I hadn't thought about it this way, when we discuss it openly. I also read a really interesting article in the Harvard Business Review recently about African American employees sometimes being less open about their personal lives at work. And that might be a result of low trust because of racism historically in the workplace. And what happens, though, is that sometimes their white colleagues see them as cold or withholding and then don't engage with them in the same way that they might with other colleagues who are more open about their personal life. And again, this can lead to a bias in promotions, in speaking feedback about projects and other very important issues. So we find it very important to talk to companies about the diversity in their group and elicit from the people who work there what kind of challenges they face and how can we work collectively to make it a smooth communication flow, and helping them with systems such as hiring and promotion.
Thank you very much for talking about it. In the past, I worked with managers who did not care about creating the balance or level of inquiry to find out their employees' preference when it comes to communication. But it seems your company is at the forefront of it. Would you say that having a balance, being curious and open to receiving a feedback about employees' preference when it comes to communication also helps leaders lead better?
It's very important. And I think, I'm a leader in my own company and I work with leaders. And I think that sometimes it's intimidating to be open to feedback because we're not sure what the feedback is going to be. And it might make us feel that people are saying that our direction is not correct. Or, and sometimes we're saying we've been doing it in a way that isn't the most effective. But if we can get beyond our own egos, that's when we grow as leaders. And that's when we can help our schools and our companies grow as well.
Very good. Nina, you are a serious entrepreneur. Before PowerTools, you also had a consulting company that was formed in 2006 called Dibner Consulting Services. Could you tell us more about that company and how it came about?
Absolutely. So I was, as I mentioned, I was a teacher. I had taught for 13 years in public school systems, urban settings for 13 years. And when I was teaching the whole time, I loved teaching. I loved teaching, and I knew in my heart that the part that I was the most interested in was the social and emotional dynamic and youth power, giving young people a voice. And so after I had taught for many years, I realized that I was not attached to the parts about grading, to the parts about all the stuff that I did not find as interesting as working with young people and helping them thrive. So I just said, I'm doing it. I left teaching, and I guess I could say kind of blindly, I started this consulting firm, Dibner Consulting Services, to work with schools on social emotional learning. And Biana, it was new for me. So I think I did it in a really smart way, is that I kept my company very small. I started with just a few clients so I could learn the ropes. And I also worked as a consultant for some other companies. So I was able to see the way that other consulting firms worked. I learned so much about the field, and I was able to really grow. I worked with Educators for Social Responsibility and with the Youth Development Institute, excellent organizations that helped me kind of grow my wings. And I grew in my own firm as well. And then by 2014, I realized it was time for me to leave other organizations and really fly on my own. And that's when I rebranded and I stopped Dibner Consulting Services and started PowerTools. I didn't like the fact that Dibner Consulting Services was my own name because I had other people working with me. And so I started PowerTools and expanded what we do and how many clients we had. And it's been an awesome ride since then.
Nina, looking back, did you have a mentor or a role model who helped you or advised you how to build your companies?
I did. I was lucky to have many mentors in my life. And it's funny, when I was growing up, both of my parents were professors and in education, in higher education. And when I was about 7, my father, who had studied psychology, in particular gerontology, which is the study of elderly people, when I was 7, he invented a machine called Lifeline, which is an emergency response system. So, for example, if someone lives alone and they fall down, they can press this button and it can call for help. And my father and mother decided to start a company around Lifeline, and neither of them were entrepreneurs. They were both professors. And on their own, they created this company together. And it ended up being a company that helped millions of people live in their own homes, stay out of hospitals, and not die. It's an incredible company. And what I learned from them was that if you felt very passionate about something, and you are willing to really put the time and effort into this project and not give up, then you can be successful. So those were my earliest role models. And then when I was teaching at my high school, at EBC Bushwick High School, the principal, Shirley Edwards, was an incredible role model for me. She was a visionary. She just didn't feel limited by some of the rules of the Department of Education. She did what she wanted to do because she was driven by her values, and that really helped me think about what my values were and how I would use them moving forward. And then when I became a consultant, there are several other people who really helped me move forward. One was a principal, Connie Hamilton, of a school named Kingsborough Early College Secondary School. And Connie hired me when I had just started consulting. I didn't really know what I was doing, and she believed in me, and she was starting a school, and we started the school together, or I helped her do that. And she had confidence in me, and she was so smart. And then also I worked for another consulting firm called Educators for Social Responsibility, and the women there, and there was one man there as well, just were brilliant. They were brilliant about consulting and working with people. They believed in supporting young people to be as successful as they could, and they understood the importance of supporting the teachers and school leaders. And so I learned from them about work ethic, about really ethics in general. Just they were so principled, and again, they believed in me, and they helped me believe in myself. So I feel incredibly fortunate to have incredible, wonderful role models.
A lot of entrepreneurs that I spoke to had agreed that the ride has lots of ups and downs. Have you experienced any uncertainties or setbacks in your entrepreneurial career?
There have been many days when I just wish that I was, not many days, but there are days when I just reminisce about my waitressing time, when I knew that every night I was coming home with, $100 in my pocket. Because one of the challenges is the flow of funds. My company gets contracts with schools and with organizations and corporations, but sometimes don't get paid on time. We had one situation where we had a contract, but they didn't pay for 7 months. And so that can be a real challenge. And I think sometimes the instability, especially as a small company, has really been anxiety producing. And so I just had to learn to work with that, getting a line of credit, making sure that I had enough clients that I didn't have to depend on one client alone to bring in the funds. I pay my consultants on time every other week. So if I have a client that isn't paying me for months, it can really be challenging. So that's been a challenge. And then I will say also, very honestly, sometimes I am my biggest challenge. So I've had times where I was intimidated. I got offers for very large jobs, and I felt nervous. Would I be able to perform? Would I be able to offer the client what they want? And that kind of thinking, I think, has held me back in the past. So I've done a lot of work on my own mindset. I've been very influenced by Carol Dweck, another role model who wrote a book called Mindset. I recommend that all leaders read it. And it's about having a growth mindset, learning from our mistakes, seeing them as learning opportunities, and understanding that it's effort. It's not about coming in with talent. It's about continuing diligently with your effort, getting back up when you make mistakes, and being optimistic.
Thank you very much for sharing with us challenges that you have experienced. I really appreciate you giving us advice that when we face challenges, the best way to deal with them is to learn how to work through them. Really great advice. As someone who is running your own company and wears many hats, how do you ensure that you still maintain a solid work-life balance in your life?
I feel incredibly lucky that I love what I do. And so I probably could be doing this job 24/7. I had an incident when my daughter was about 6 or 7. I think she was about 6 years old, and we were in my living room, and my laptop was open on the table, and my daughter said to me, "Okay, Mommy, let's play mommy and daughter, and I'll be the mommy and you be the daughter." And she opened the laptop and she started to pretend to type. And she said to me, "I'm sorry, honey. I'm too busy to talk to you right now. I've got to get this work done." And it was like, wow, to see myself in her eyes, I realized how much work I was doing at home and how that might be to her, that the model that she has in me is that I'm too busy for her. So I really decided to make a concerted effort towards having a better work-life balance. And so one thing that I decided to do is every Tuesday I leave work at 3 and I pick my daughter up from school and we spend the afternoon together. That's been beautiful. So spending more time with my daughter has been great. And then remembering that the work is never done and that's okay. So I am going to make a firm end time. And I leave at 5 or 6 and I go home and I do not do work from home anymore. So that helps. And then another thing is finding things that bring me joy that are outside of work. So I do meditate and I enjoy dancing and having friends over. And so when I notice that I have some big deadlines, I will make sure that I'm also incorporating at least one fun thing that's completely unwork-like in my week so that I can keep that balance.
Wonderful. So what you're saying to us, find things that makes you happy besides work.
Exactly. There's that other thing. And then also finding some things that make you happy that can make you happier throughout your day. So I do keep a gratitude journal, and every morning I write down 10 things that I'm grateful for. And when I go to bed, I also write down 10 things I'm grateful for. And the challenge I give myself is to not repeat something I've written already. And so I have pages and pages of things, and they're tiny little things. So the sound of hearing the birds when I'm walking down the street, or it could be having a home where I feel safe and I enjoy coming, all those things. And it does constantly remind me that my life is bigger than my work, although my work is something that I'm also good for.
Nina, I know that PowerTools' focus is on equity in education and workplace. Could you tell us more about it?
Yes. So for us, equity is about making sure that it's not just that we celebrate diversity, but that we actually strive for equality in treatment, in promotion, in value and regard for everyone in an educational institution and in our corporate and business clients. So in education, when we talk about equity, we're talking about working with schools to promote the rights, the experience of all children so that they are receiving a quality education and they are seen with high regard and high expectations by teachers. Unfortunately, historically and currently, we know that students of color are not treated equally to white students. And in fact, this is shown by in neighborhoods, poor neighborhoods, there are fewer resources, and also within school settings in rich neighborhoods, children of color are often not treated with the same high expectations that white students are. And there's a lot of research on that. So one thing that we do when we are seeking equity is we work with teachers and school leaders to do trainings on unconscious bias, trainings to help them understand better the inequity within schools and have them make action plans within the school. Another thing toward equity is we do a lot of work around youth voice. So a quick example is that we were called to come to a school where it was considered a persistently dangerous school, which means it had a high number of incidences or violent behaviors by young people and one of the highest suspension rates in New York City. We came to the school, and the first thing we did is we interviewed everyone. So not just teachers and leaders, but the security guards and the students and parent representatives, the office staff, so that everyone's voice is heard. And then the next thing we did is we wrote down everybody's perspective, and to increase youth voice, we created a change agent group where young people were able to look at all of the suggestions from all of the stakeholders on how to improve the school, and they selected a project that they thought was most important, and the youth worked on a project to help improve the school culture. In that way, we're helping young people take their leadership, and we're putting youth opinions at the forefront. So there are many ways you work towards equity in that way. Rethinking discipline systems is another one. And in business, helping equity in the business arena, it looks very different in different ways. So we do a lot of coaching, or we do coaching for leaders to help them think about the processes they use with their employees in terms of hiring and promotion and feedback to make those equitable. We also do surveys of employees to see how they feel the culture is at the workplace and whether they're getting a fair shake or they're being regarded as someone who has something to contribute. And then we do a lot of team building activities and retreats, and we do effective teaming retreats so that we can work with employees and leaders together and create action plans that really come from within the company to help them improve their culture, leading to more equity.
Excellent. Could you share any success stories on the equity that includes organizations that you consulted with? Any feedback, any outcomes they experienced as a result of them working with you?
Yes, I'll give you an example. We had a client. NYU Langone Medical Center is a very, very large medical center in New York City, and in fact, they're growing, constantly growing. And we worked with them doing power teaming, and they had 80 people who came to us. And this was within the development department, and all levels. We had the head leader and intern who just started that week. And as a result of our debriefing, a lot of people were talking about equity and communication, and that a lot of people felt that they didn't have access to. The leader was wonderful, but the channels of communication could be better, and it was important for them to have better systems of communication so that everybody was heard and could contribute. So after our experience, they were amazing. The leaders of the team created a culture, like a council, that did not include leadership at all. It was all, to use lack of a better term, rank and file people within the department who came up. They looked at all of the recommendations that we had compiled from their own recommendations and ours, and they created this team, and they shifted the way that they communicated within their department. So one fun success is that the leader, who, like I mentioned, was fantastic, and she wanted to have clear communication with people. She did a Monday bagel, a thing where every Monday she would be in the the cafeteria, employees' cafeteria, and she would bring bagels, and she was just accessible so that anyone wanted to talk to her about their weekend or some ideas for a project or whatever, they would have access to her on a weekly basis. This is still continuing, and this was several years ago.
Wonderful. So obviously you consult organizations and coach leaders how to be better leaders. How do you assess your own leadership style, and how do you know if you're successful with your team? Could you share some thoughts on that?
Yes, I'm laughing because I'm constantly assessing my own style. And one way is just to ask. Ask people, how is this relationship going? And what are your thoughts on my leadership style? And being very, very open. I have a very collaborative style. So people, I always say push back. Please push back and tell me what you think about this. So I'm always thinking about that and reflecting on it. I actually, journal sometimes on how I feel like interactions went. And then another thing is that I've hired a coach. We coach. That's something that my company does. And I've actually hired a coach to help me with my leadership style so that I can always reflect on, am I being effective? Am I being true to, my company has a 4-point approach. And so I always want to make sure that my leadership style is aligned with my company's approach. And so that's something that I spend a lot of time both reflecting internally and working with other people on.
Interesting. So you are a coach who has a coach.
Correct.
Could you tell us what are other benefits of having or hiring a coach?
I think having a coach is incredibly important, and research will back this too, because we used to offer just one-time events, and people would come and they would have a good time, and like I mentioned, you can have some long-term impact. However, you might go to a training and get fantastic insight, and then you go back to work and things get crazy again because they're so busy. It's in those real moments that people need support, and that's when I need support. In those real moments when so many things are happening, you're not sure how to manage it, that's when we need support, and we need, research shows, we need continuous support. So the reason I find coaching to be effective for me, and the reason why we offer it, is coaching is different than consulting. We offer consulting. That's when we have our expert opinion based on years of experience, and we can offer suggestions of what we think are best next steps. Coaching is more about working with your client to help them identify their own goals and to support them to meet their goals. So we offer accountability, we offer strategies, and we offer an unjudging ear. Mm-hmm. And we find that people want someone to talk to, but aren't necessarily comfortable talking to, especially leaders may not feel comfortable talking to other people in the organization about some of the aspects of leadership that they don't feel secure about. Mm-hmm. So we offer an outside ear and also perspective, where we have a fresh perspective to be able to help people walk towards their goals and hold them accountable.
So would you say that coaching helps you evaluate your work and then also gives you support to move in the direction that you want to go?
That's exactly correct. I mean, there are times that I feel excited and energized about a project, and talking to my coach about that, she helps me kind of bounce back. Here's what I hear you excited about. How can we integrate that even more into your work? And then there are moments in which I feel really frustrated or insecure or unsure or intimidated. And having a coach who knows me is so helpful to say, okay, wait a minute, let's remember this, that, and this about your leadership style and what you've accomplished, and why do you think that right now you're feeling so intimidated? So it really is essential in terms of having someone who knows you, who knows how to listen without their own agenda, and who knows how to be non-judging to really help you get to the deeper elements of your goals and finding strategies to be successful. I find it incredibly helpful.
I really appreciate you mentioning the importance of being non-judgmental, because I have experience when I feel accepted, I make a faster progress, I perform better, and I have seen this in others too. So I think it's a very important subject to talk about, and I really appreciate you bringing it up. From our conversation prior to this interview, we talked a lot about your work with underprivileged youth. Could you talk to us about the difficulties that might arise working in the urban education?
It's interesting. I think there's a lot of people when they think about urban schools, and when we're talking about urban schools, we are working, most of our schools are in poor neighborhoods, very poor neighborhoods, students of color, of course, because our country is quite segregated. And so it's funny because sometimes when I was teaching there and now that I'm working there, people say, oh my gosh, you're working in the poorest neighborhoods of New York. The difficulty is not in the youth. Kids are kids. And so our kids are kids. Some of the difficulty in working in these environments is that the schools are literally under-resourced as compared to private schools, so that young people are not getting the same resources that people in wealthier schools are getting. Teachers in New York City are not necessarily getting paid the same as in Long Island. And then also there are stressors in the community that make it more challenging. There's large homeless rates, and we know because of racism and oppression, it's more difficult for people in the community to get quality jobs. Healthcare is not as good because, again, about some of the systemic racism that doesn't provide good healthcare. So the difficulty really is caused by our society, not because of the kids in the schools. Yeah, that's what I would say. Mm-hmm. I think another thing that it's not a difficulty, it's an interesting challenge, is that because of these stereotypes about poor neighborhoods and because of the reality of being under-resourced, a lot of times the teachers in these schools are newer teachers who are less experienced. And so it's an interesting challenge for us. One of our goals in working in these environments are helping teachers maximize their capacity as a teacher. And we do help teachers with integrating social emotional learning for themselves so that they can be better teachers, and helping young people do that and helping them gain skills as effective teachers.
So what kind of tools you give to teachers to be more effective when working with underprivileged youth who, as we know, are facing many challenges?
Well, I think that one thing that's really important is helping educators understand about what we call trauma-informed practice, that a lot of young people have experienced trauma in their lives. So trauma can include homelessness, and all of our youth across the nation experience at least one of these. Not all, but almost everyone experiences at least one. So it could be illness, divorce, homelessness, having experienced violence or abuse. There are a lot of things that are traumatic to young people. And what we've learned from neuroscience recently is that when young people or adults, but in particular young people, experience trauma, that it can impact the brain. Mm-hmm. So what happens when we experience a traumatic event is that we can get triggered in the future. We can get triggered by something different that brings up, the brain kind of reacts to it as if it is a trauma itself. So, for example, a young person who experienced a lot of trauma and then has low trust for adults, and then they go into a school, and an adult just reaches over to them and takes their hat off their head, saying, "We don't have no hats in this school." That actually goes into their personal space and takes their hat. When the young person experiences that violation of personal space, their brain can go into the fight or flight mode. Now, what happens if you can imagine going into a meeting and someone grabs your purse or your phone out of your hand, you would never want that as an adult. What happens to young people is they can get triggered, but then the adult perceives their reaction as disrespectful. Where it's not about the other person at all, it's about their own experience of a lack of personal space. So there's a lot of education to be done with adults about how to support young people who have been through trauma and to depersonalize some of these behaviors, how to recognize behaviors that come from trauma, and how to support young people to calm down, to build trust, and to realize that this currently is not a traumatic event. Another thing that we work with teachers on is unconscious bias. So everyone in the world has unconscious bias because we have historically needed it to survive, but it's not helpful for us anymore. And we get these messages from our families, from the media, and they are about judging other people and seeing some people as inferior or superior, seeing things that are different than us as unpleasant. And so when we help, what happens in school systems, unfortunately, is it has big impact. So girls of color, Black girls in particular, on average are seen by adults, white adults, as being several years older than they really are. We call this adultification. And when adults see them as older, they see them as more highly sexualized, they see them as not needing care and support and caretaking than they really do. And so this can lead, and it does lead, to more discipline than white kids for the same exact experiences. That the white kid or a Black kid might do the same thing girls, and girls are being suspended and disciplined at a higher level. So in order to help teachers, we try to help them undo their unconscious bias, understand how to use trauma-informed practice, and then also just using a real strengths-based approach with their young people to recognize all of the assets that their young people do and ways that they can engage young people.
Very interesting. One of the points that you mentioned is helping teachers take things less personal, which, as we know, it can cause a serious burnout. So how do you go about coaching teachers to the personalized stuff that are happening? Because in a teaching life and in a teaching day, a lot of things are coming at you and are happening simultaneously. What kind of tools do you give to teachers so that they can effectively deal with situations and at the same time not take them personal?
I laughed as you were asking that question because it's really hard to do that. I mean, teaching is one of the hardest jobs in the world. It's so rewarding and it's so challenging. I think teachers make more decisions per minute than almost any other profession. So you have a lot going on. And sometimes it's unpleasant when you're with a bunch of people who don't really want to do the lesson that you spent hours preparing. So I completely get it. So one thing we do is we want to help the educators take care of themselves. So the more happy that we are, the better our work-life balance, the more that we can be relaxed and manage our own stress, the more that we are being good to ourselves and finding joy, the more energy we'll have for the classroom and the less things will bother us. So that's one component, is helping people feel happy in their own lives. The other one that we talk about is that a lot of the things that are happening in the school are just adolescent behavior. Even though they're so irritating, they've happened a million times before because it is how the brain develops. Young people are seeking autonomy, and so and usually in middle school and in high school, young people just want to be more autonomous, and that means breaking rules and not listening to adults sometimes, and it's just the way our brains develop. So if we understand that the behaviors have happened a million times before, they're going to happen a million times more because it's just adolescent brain development, then what we can do is prioritize the things that we want to be ready for with a strategy. Mm-hmm. So teachers talk to me about the things that absolutely drive them crazy. So of course people say that when someone uses a derogatory term or they bully someone else, it drives them crazy. Of course. But I've had many teachers say to me, well, chewing gum in class, or when they wear their hat and they're not supposed to, it drives me absolutely crazy. I will tell you that's going to happen again a million times because it's not about you. They're wearing their hat because they want to wear a hat, not because they want you to have a bad day. So if you can keep on remembering, have a mantra that you say to yourself, this is not about me, this is not about being disrespectful, then they can figure out what kind of reaction that they can have that's productive instead of just being reactive.
Good. That's a very good point, not being reactive. Because most of us tend to be reactive.
And that's just going to give us a heart attack. Mm-hmm. Because these things just, like you mentioned, Biana, so many things happen in an hour, and we have to just, you don't want to ignore it. But if a young person comes up to me and they're like, yo, mm-hmm. I'm not going to respond to yo because I'm a teacher. But instead of yelling at them, I'm just going to say, okay, go back to the door and let's try that again. And kids will self-correct. So giving young people an opportunity to correct and self-correct will give them those learning skills as opposed to punishing them.
Would you say that our teachers also need a faith that kids can self-correct?
I have to say this is one of the things that I feel the most passionate about. I feel so passionate about the fact that often as adults we do not value the depth of character and the potential of young people. So we are asked over and over as a company, can we provide lessons that teach young people how to be empathetic or how to be respectful? Now, we have lessons on respect and empathy, and those are very important characteristics, but it's not about teaching them how to do it, because young people do know how to do it. I think when we have young people that are disrespectful and young people that don't feel empathy, there is something else going on there. That it might be a school that doesn't invite young people to have choice or to have voice. It might be a school where there are little microaggressions against young people all day long, so there's no trust there. I think that often we really just need to take a step back and say to ourselves, is this how I would want to be treated? Like, would we allow ourselves to be treated the way we see teachers treating young people in a classroom? Sometimes, of course, there are amazing teachers. But I think often when we are embarrassing young people in front of the classroom, we don't realize the impact it has on young people, that it destroys trust. And then young people are less likely to want to perform or to want to be polite. So I do think that there's something more holistic about the way we see young people that needs to be examined.
That is really well put it. So we have few more minutes left, and I would like to talk about neuroplasticity. Your company has done a lot of research and work on neuroplasticity, and in particular, how neuroplasticity impacts learning and receiving information. Could you tell us a little bit more about it?
Sure. So yeah, we are nuts for research, and in the last couple of years, we've been spending more time learning about the brain because there's so much new research in the last decade about how the brain works and how it's connected to learning. And in fact, I'm working on a book with my colleague, Tricia Taylor, who works in England on these topics about the brain and how it connects with relationships and memory and our mindset. So neuroplasticity is this concept that when we have experiences, it actually changes the brain. So our brain, when I was a kid, I learned that you have a certain amount of brain cells, and then as you go through your life, you just lose those brain cells, and that's it. And you can't teach an old dog new tricks, that kind of stuff. It actually turns out that our brain changes constantly. So our brain, after listening to the show, your brain will be different than it was before, and tonight your brain will be different than it is at the end of the show. And that is about what we call neuroplasticity. It is the ability of our neurons, or our brain cells, to create new connections and to eliminate connections based on practice and effort and experience. So, for example, let's say I'm often stressed out and I think, oh my gosh, my life is so stressful, and I have this feeling of being stressed all the time. So my brain is just kind of on high alert. If I start practicing meditation, for example, it will change some of my neural pathways and it'll create new habits. And so in that way, my brain is it becomes more likely that I will retain information, that I will be able to react calmly. There are all these changes in the brain that happens because of meditation. Well, it turns out there are other things that can help change our brain for learning. So one thing I think is so interesting is that when I learned how to study, I learned that highlighting and rereading my notes was the best way. And it turns out that really doesn't work. There's very low impact, which surprised me. So now we know that quizzing yourself and having flashcards is one of the most important things. So we can use these new things that we know about the brain to enhance our learning. And then also to realize what neuroplasticity teaches us is that we can change. So we no longer can say, I'm not good at math. I used to say that. I'm not good at math. It's not in my DNA. I don't know how to do it. My brain doesn't do it. But in fact, if I made an effort and I practiced math and I would be able to learn it. But people can learn new things at all aspects, all ages in their life. And so that's really helped us think about helping teachers be better teachers. It's helped us with people in the workplace think about learning different leadership styles. And it's helped us with young people in terms of their mindsets about themselves, how they see themselves and how they learn.
And also thinking about neuroplasticity and aging.
Correct. And I know this is something that's close to your heart because you do teach people to play instruments at an older age. Am I right?
Right. Yeah, that's one of the things that I do. Yeah. And we've seen a big difference with, understanding of concept of neuroplasticity.
Yeah. That's right. So exactly. I think a lot of us just say, oh, I just can't do that. I'm not good at that. So with my daughter is 10, and I don't allow her to say, I'm not good at this or I'm bad at this. She has to say, I'm not practiced at this. And we find that almost every single time she says when she thinks I'm bad at it, the truth is she doesn't do it very often, or she avoids it because she thinks she's bad at it. So instead of saying I'm bad at math, she's like, oh, I'm not practiced at math. And that gives her the opportunity to realize, I'm not practiced at it. I'm not that good at it right now, but I could be better if I made more effort and practiced it more.
Any final thought for us?
Yes, I'm thinking, in terms of leadership, Biana, one thing I want to say for people out there is we all have leadership qualities within us, and that leadership means very many things. Sometimes it means being assertive and standing in front of a crowd and leading people. And sometimes being a leader means accepting other people's leadership and stepping back so that you can give room for other people to speak. So I think that one thing that's important for is us to really think about what leadership qualities that we have and feel strong about those. And another thing is that it's very easy for people to get caught up in the ways that they don't feel that they're ready, or that I may not be a strong enough leader, or I think that if I go into this workplace and I'm a leader, people are going to find out that I'm a fake. And there's a woman named Amy Cuddy from Harvard University, and she talks about fake it to make it. And that's really based in research, that if we even pretend to have confidence and we really go for it, that it will build our confidence. And anyone with a lot of effort and practice and great values can be a leader.
So Nina, how can people get in touch if they want to use your services?
I would love to talk to anyone, and my website is PowerToolsForProgress.com. So it's Power, P-O-W-E-R, Tools is T-O-O-L-S, For is F-O-R, Progress is P-R-O-G-R-E-S-S.com. And they can reach me at info@PowerToolsForProgress.com as well.
Thank you for tuning in and listening to the Leadership with Biana Kovic Show. Remember that you're all leaders in your own rights, and the impact that you're meant to achieve starts with small acts of kindness, curiosity, and generosity. Please give us a like and subscribe to our channel. Thank you again, and until next time.